All right, good afternoon. My name is Dennis Sekine. Some of you might know me in my other persona as Dan Seki. I will be your MC this afternoon and even to the evening. At this point, we're going to have some brief welcome messages from the groups that are sponsoring this evening's Living Truths program. First of all, we'd like to call up Pastor Amy Wake from the Wesley United Methodist Church. Pastor Amy is committed to social action and justice, and she has a big heart for immigrants.
Thank you so much. This was a dream of one of our church members, Jane, who knew Jeannie Houston and the family, knows them, and really wanted to find a way to show this film, now that it's out on DVD, and connect it to what's going on in our world today. I grew up at Harris United Methodist Church right down the street. I remember coming here for the Interfaith Thanksgiving services every year, and my church just raised me to be somebody who put a high value on justice work and caring for our neighbors, as that's who we are as Christians. Christians have sort of a bad rap these days. But if you really look at the teachings of Jesus, if you really look at the scriptures, the Bible, you will see that Jesus was someone who broke rules in order to love people. He broke rules in order to include them, to touch them, and heal them. And Jesus would not be someone who advocated for kingdom, for empire. Jesus is somebody who would advocate for community and working together. And that's why we're here today as an interfaith project, because we all believe that being moral and ethical people in this world, we're needed in this world today, amen? We need your voices, we need your presence, and we need to speak out against the forces of evil, if you want to call it, or the forces of darkness, or the people who have traveled a different road, so to speak, because this is not our country. Our country is better than this. We can do better than this, and together we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Amy. Next, I'd like to call up Chief Minister here at the Hawaii Betsuin Temple, Reverend Yuika Hasebe. She has supported activities that promote and improve the general welfare of our community. Rinban Hasebe.
Good afternoon, and then I'm Yuika Hasebe. I am serving as the Chief Minister of Honpa Hongwanji Hawai Betsuin here. On behalf of the Honpa Hongwanji Hawai Betsuin, I would like to warmly welcome all of you of this screening of Farewell to Manzanar. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the committee for making this event possible. I am particularly thankful for this collaborative spirit of interfaith work. The Buddhism, we talk about that everything is connected, interconnected to each other. We support each other. The world has now facing many challenges, and through events like this, I sincerely appreciate that we have the opportunity to reflect on the history together and to work toward building a more harmonious and a peaceful world for all of us. So again, I would like to extend my warmest welcome to all of you, and please have a wonderful time here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinban. And finally, I'd like to call up Mr. Dave Atterson, who will be representing the statewide Honpa Hongwanji mission of Hawaii.
Thank you, Dennis. Welcome, everybody. You might guess that I wear kind of a few hats. One of them is as a temple board member here. I'm also the part-time communications coordinator in the bishop's office. And I'm also, I serve on the statewide committee on social concerns for the Honpa Hongwanji. So that's kind of one of the main sponsoring groups tonight. So that's why I just kind of wanted to add my extra welcome and let you know just very briefly that that committee is made up of representatives from the temples around the state. Not every temple has a representative, but every district, every island has a representative. And one of our signature programs, of course, is our annual social welfare program, where we do a drive from November to August, and money comes in, and we often make grants for relief efforts, but we also make grants for innovative events. And that's kind of where, like this one here, where it's a social concerns related project because we're trying to understand better what happened in the past and connect that maybe in our own minds to what's happening today. So the better we understand the past, the better we understand today, and the more informed our actions will be. So once again, on behalf of Bishop Umitani and the Committee on Social Concerns, which is chaired by Reverend Blaine Higa of Kona Hongwanji, welcome to the screening and the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
So just to give you a little background, most of you are, I'm sure, already familiar, but Farewell to Manzanar is a 1976 film, so it's not a new film, but it's recently been sent out in DVD form. So Farewell to Manzanar was made in 1976, based on a book of the same title by Jeanne Wakatsuki Houston and James Houston. The movie tells the story of Jeanne Wakatsuki's experience as a Japanese-American child imprisoned with her family at Manzanar during World War II. It parallels today's experience of immigrants who have been removed suddenly and forcefully from their homes, separated from their families, and incarcerated at distant and sometimes undisclosed locations. The film will be followed, as I said, with a panel discussion. So, without further ado, Farewell to Manzanar. Okay, so just so that we have the maximum use of our time here, I'd like to introduce Logan Narikawa, who is the president of the Japanese American Citizens League here in Honolulu. He will introduce the panel to us.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. All right, let's make sure that we have as much time as possible for the panelists. So I'm going to introduce them really quickly, but as it turns out, we've talked before, and one of the things that came out in our brief discussions was intensely personal kinds of relationships to the film, as well as intensely personal reactions to the film itself, whether it was when it first came out or in subsequent viewings, and a sense of its ongoing relevance to our times today. And I think there's a tendency maybe to talk around things, and I know that there was a panel earlier this morning that kind of addressed many of the similar themes that you see represented in this film. And I think it is worth saying kind of directly when we talk about the relevance of a film like this, or the importance of bringing forward history and its ongoing kind of lessons that might teach us. Maybe we all are thinking about the same thing, but it's I think sometimes important to be explicit. So what we're talking about is the ways in which a government can be racist towards its own citizens, the ways that government officials kind of beyond just a personal kind of animosity or animus can use the power of their position to unfairly treat a group of people sort of arbitrarily. You can come up with justifications, but they often don't hold up even in court. They don't hold up against the very laws of this country. And still, like, you can have people incarcerated, interned for years while these cases make their way through the court, or while public opinion shifts enough that there's sort of the pressure brought to bear on an administration that made an arbitrary and racist judgment against a group of people. So what are we talking about when we say the relevance of a film like this today? Currently, it's not necessarily the case that Japanese communities are being discriminated against wholesale, but there are certainly other groups who, because of the way that they look, the color of their skin, the language that they speak, even in some cases, the very fact that they have an accent, even if they do speak English, are being targeted for detention, incarceration, removal from their communities. And this is even happening in Hawaii. So that's one of the things that we want everybody to sort of just, I think, be aware of if you're not already. And I think it's important to foreground our conversation and ground it in explicitly what sorts of connections we'd like to make. So that's how I want to just make sure that that's brought to the table. It's not necessarily exactly where our conversations are going to go. What we're going to do, as I said before, is talk about some of the very personal relationships that the folks on this panel have to this film, including the reactions when it first came out, or in some cases, their very involvement with making this thing a reality from the time it was created as a book into the time that it was developed into a film. And so maybe if we can start with Carol and then come down this way, because
Okay.
we can talk about your
Because
involvement.
I was sat here because I thought I would be last. Okay. I'm Carol Hayashino. People here may know me as the former president and executive director of the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii. But prior to coming here, I was in California, in San Francisco, in fact. And believe it or not, that film is 50 years old. 50 years old. And 50 years ago, I was working at San Francisco State University in Asian American Studies. And Edison Uno was an advisor to this film. It was just beginning production, and there was a lot of controversy over this film in the community. Number one, in 1975, 76, you did not talk about the incarceration. It was still very painful, very raw, emotional experience for families. So it was somewhat controversial in that way. And then on the other hand, it was controversial because Jeanne Wakatsuki Houston, with her husband and filmmaker John Cordy, were making this first major film that told the story of a family's incarceration experience. So on the other hand, people wanted it to be told the right way. And there was a lot of discussion and debate about the film. But I have to say, 50 years, watching the film today, it mirrors what's happening today, the challenges we face today. And the factors at play, prejudice, hysteria, failure of political leadership, the misinformation, those are the factors that led to the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans, and those are the factors that are at play today. I know we'll talk more about this, so I'm not going to comment too much more. What I did bring and I wanted to share was this poster. This is a poster that is in the film of the family pre-war. But this poster is 25 years ago. And this poster was to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Farewell to Manzanar. And we took the film out of the archives, it was at Universal Studio then. We took the film out of archives and we played it in communities in San Francisco, Sacramento, Marin, where John Cordy lived, and Los Angeles. And we created a movement then with our Lieutenant Governor of California, Cruz Bustamante, and the teachers. And we replicated 20,000 videos, and the publisher donated 20,000 copies of the book. And we were able to distribute it to all of California libraries and public schools. Yeah. So that's my story to begin with.
Thank you, Carol. And so next up, we're just going to come down the line. So Tina, if you will, I know.
Oh,
Yeah.
hard to follow after Carol.
It's a little bit difficult, but yeah, if you would say a little bit about what you do as well, and then some
Sure.
of your kind of reactions to watching the film.
Sure, thank you. This is my second time watching this film, and the first time I had the privilege of watching it with Carol, along with some of the other folks from the Cultural Center, and I find it every bit as impactful and moving, and also really disturbing, right? To reflect on the parallels that we see between the Japanese incarceration experience of World War II and the mass incarceration and detention of immigrants in America today, including here in Hawaii. In my role currently, I serve as the community and policy advocate for the legal clinic. We provide we're a nonprofit organization based here. We provide immigration and legal services to low-income immigrants in Hawaii, and we also engage in policy advocacy and community education. Some of my personal connections to this film, I am the granddaughter of an Okinawan lady who was born and raised here in Hawaii. She was the daughter of Okinawan immigrants who came to Hawaii to work in the plantations, and she was a child when Pearl Harbor happened, and she talked about that experience with me, but she never talked about the internment experience or how our family may have been affected. But fast forward to today, I am engaged to a wonderful Japanese American gentleman whose family is from Hawaii, and his grandparents met in internment. His grandmother was interned in Jerome, Arkansas, and his grandfather volunteered for the 442nd. And I saw, echoes of his family's experience in this film, and it's just very, very moving.
Thank you, Tina. And next we have Ken, and maybe Ken, if you would share again the experience of seeing it when it was broadcast for the first time, and a little bit about its importance to you at that time in your life, and why for the kind of community at large you thought it was a really important moment when it came out.
Sure. Whoops. Hello. Sure. Thank you. This is actually the second time I've seen this film since it was first broadcast, and I have to say that I am stunned at how much of it I remember. Like, from the moment that it started rolling, I realized that I found myself going, oh, I know, the next scene is this, the next scene is that. Because it left a really huge impression on me, for two reasons. One was, when it came out, I was 12, right? And I'm reminded as I watched this, I hadn't really thought about it when you and I were talking, but watching this really brought home conversations I had with my dad, because my father made it a point to try to teach me about what the wartime experience for Japanese Americans was, whether it be his experience or what he heard from others. And it really reminded me of a story that he told me about when the 442 was in basic training. They were in basic training, I think, in Camp Shelby. And the mainland guys and the Hawaii guys were fighting a lot, fighting incessantly. The mainland guys thought the Hawaii guys were stupid and talked funny. And the Hawaii guys thought the mainland guys were stuck up and full of themselves. So they were fighting all the time. And a lot of the higher-ups were beginning to think, gee, this is never going to work. And then one day they're all told, we are going on a trip. We're going on an excursion. They don't tell them what they're doing. And the Hawaii guys are thinking this is going to be a good time. They pack ukulele, they're joking around, and they load up and they start traveling out, and they realize they're driving for a long time, traveling out to the middle of nowhere. And then they see this thing in the distance, which looks like some sort of structure or a series of structures. And they're like, gee, what is this? And then they get a little bit closer and they go, oh, it must be some kind of army camp or something, because they see barracks and stuff. And they get a little bit closer and they realize it's surrounded by barbed wire, but the guns are pointed inward. And once they get there, they realize that a lot of the guys, that the mainland guys that volunteered to join them to fight, came out of camps like this. And that was a very sobering moment for the Hawaii guys, because they were thinking, every single one of them, because he told me, you talk to those guys, every single one of them walked out of there going, would I have done that? Would I have volunteered out if I knew that my family was being held behind barbed wire in a place like that and getting treated like that? Would I have volunteered knowing that I had to believe in a country that did not believe in me? And he said, I don't know. To this day, I don't know if I would ever volunteer doing that under those circumstances. And he would bring this up like once or twice a year from the time I was about 5, because this is when he first told me the story. And just out of the blue, I'd know what he was thinking. He goes, I don't know if I would have done that. Just, we'd be driving somewhere. That's how much of an impact it left on him. So fast forward a little bit to right around the time this thing came out, right? I'm 12, so this is a number of years after I'm 5. And, we're in class and we're doing a unit on World War II. And the teacher asks, she goes through the whole thing about Pearl Harbor, and then she asks, so what happened after Pearl Harbor was bombed? And I got really excited because I raised my hand because I knew the answer, because, like a lot of folks in this room, I think, when you're growing up, you get together with your parents, your aunties and uncles, and your cousins, and everyone has dinner. But then after dinner, it's talk story time, and the uncles and the aunties and your folks, they talk, and you listen to the stories they're telling. So that's how I learned about World War II. That's how I learned about the camps. It's from the time I was a small kid. So I'm raising my hand. I'm all excited. And I go, and she goes, yes, yes. And I go, that's when America entered the war, and then the Japanese were put into the camps. Mm-hmm. And I got shut down immediately. I realized from the way the teacher reacted, I realized I'd stepped in something really bad. And it was something I stepped in really bad, because from that moment onward, I was labeled as a troublemaker. A behavioral hazard was what I was labeled as because of that. And on top of that, it really struck me because I never heard mention at all, one breath of a mention in a classroom setting about the internment until I was in my 3rd year of college. Wow. So when I hear stories about how our national historic sites like Manzanar and other camps like this are being saddled with an executive order that calls for, people to report on any language or any mention or any reference to something that might somehow put America in a unfavorable light at sites like this, I can't help but feel that people are missing the point. History is uncomfortable, but history must be recognized and history must be preserved. The deletion of that history, the deletion and the diminishment of that history is wrong, and we must all stand against it. And watching this reminded me of that. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ken. So last step, and then what we're gonna do is just snake back down this way. But I think it's worth asking this question first. I wondered, because it's come up a few times already, how many of the folks in the audience have seen the movie before tonight, if you'd raise your hand? Okay. And then how many of you have read the book? Okay. Oh, interesting how it's not necessarily the same people. Maybe just if you've either read the book or seen the movie, and then I think almost all of us are going to have their hands. So either one or the other, just out of curiosity. Oh, okay. So the impact, I think, is clear. People didn't show up tonight because they were seeking out to watch an old movie that they'd never seen before. In a lot of cases, so maybe something that they're very familiar with and had like a lasting impact. And so wondering if you can share a little bit about your very, very personal history with this film and the team that was behind it, and
Right.
those being your family.
Yeah, so Jeanne Wakatsuki was my mother. The beginning scene, there's the family of four, mom, dad, and two kids. I'm the kid in the yellow shirt with the funky haircut. And I actually had a haircut like that when I was a kid. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that I have a distinctly personal relationship to this film. And my reactions over time have differed. This was the second time that I've watched the film as an adult. The first time I did that was back in the 90s. And as you can imagine, it's hard to watch, a lot of emotions, raw emotions, a lot of feelings come up, anger, pride. And that's coming from the perspective of an adult who understands and grasps the significance of the story, importance that the story being continued to be told, and et cetera. But it's distinctly different than when I first watched the film. I did watch it when it first came out, and I was much younger then. And it's funny because watching the film again and seeing the pictures back there from the set of the film making, it brought back a lot of memories. And because our family spent time on the set when the film was being made, and so that kind of had an effect on how I viewed the film when I actually watched it. Because I don't know, I was 7, 8 years old. Our family went up to Oregon, to Tule Lake, where the film was being made, and we were up there for the whole summer. And for a kid, it was very fun. We were on a movie set. There's equipment, stuff going on, famous actors. I mean, I recognized Pat Morita because he was Arnold from Happy Days, so that was kind of a big deal. And I didn't recognize all the other actors, but my dad said, "Oh, these are all like prominent Asian American actors and stuff." And so, and we spent our days just running around the set. A lot of my cousins were there, and so they were getting involved in different ways. They had a big workshop, so a lot of my cousins were, building sets and things like that. And there was a bunch of us that were always trying to jockey to get in scenes. My sister actually made it, so she was. Gabby's sitting right there, and a couple of my other cousins. But the scene where they're watching the Abbott and Costello movies, and the four girls that are laughing, Gabby's one of those girls. And then my big moment was we were in the scene, me and Gabby, and it did make the cut, but I was in the background, right, and they would film the scene, and then I would get my cue, and I would pull her pigtails, and then she'd chase me around the barracks or whatever. And so, we did like 5 or 6 cuts, and so that was like super fun because, I had the chance of being in a movie, and then I got to pull my sister's pigtail 6 times without getting in trouble. But yeah, and filming wrapped, and we went home, and I was watching TV, and this was back in the 70s. And I'm watching, like Hawaii Five-0 and Rockford Files and Kung Fu. And then I'm seeing all the guys that were on the set. And I'm like, oh, I remember that guy. I remember having lunch with that guy and all that stuff. And then so when I watched the film, it was kind of like the same kind of like, looking through the eyes of a naive young kid who had a really fun summer filming, this movie. And, I was watching the movie and just doing the same thing. Like, I remember filming that scene. I remember seeing that guy, So it was less of an emotional experience for me at that time. But again, I was 7, 8 years old. But of course, as I grew up, as I got to understand the significance of the book and the story and all that stuff, the next time I viewed the film as an adult, it had much more emotional impact, and it was much harder to watch, to be honest. And it's still hard to watch. It's easier now, but it's still difficult. So it's my distinctly personal.
I appreciate that. And I think maybe a quick follow-up question is if you remember any stories about the actual making of the film or the process of writing the book. I know there's the line at the end that there were 30 years that kind of went in between. I imagine it's the writing of the book and then kind of stamping that word farewell as a way of memorializing and then I think processing like the memory of the camp. But if you recall any stories about whether it was the creation of the book or the production of the movie and maybe what your parents might have shared about either.
Not really. Again, I was very young at the time. So, yeah,
I can I
go
make
ahead.
a comment on
Yeah,
it?
please.
Let's see. First of all, I wanted to ask the crowd, how many of you have had the chance to visit Manzanar? I saw, yeah, you were wearing it. Okay, so you know. So in the film, because I was on this set as well. I was older than you. But I don't remember the kid, but, we had to be on set same time. So some of the camp scenes are Tule Lake, and you spot Tule Lake because you can see the mountain in the back, because the mountains at Tule they're very distinct, and then the mountains at Manzanar. So there are scenes also shot at Manzanar, if you've seen Manzanar. The cemetery scene, the sentry tower at the gate, that's Manzanar. Their pre-war home was in Mill Valley, it was in Marin County. The Manzanar riot that took place was shot in Santa Rita Prison, women's prison. Yeah, it's still there. Where else? But so I recall the scenes, and when I see the film, there are so many familiar faces because much of it was shot in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. So there are very familiar faces from San Francisco, Japantown. And so it's also sad because they've passed, people have passed. But it's very heartwarming to see that they are forever memorialized on film. Josh mentioned Pat Morita. So Pat Morita's character is real, right? Yeah. Toyo Miyatake, photographer from Los Angeles, actually did document photos in Manzanar, and much later in life, published a book with Ansel Adams on Manzanar. There are a couple of other characters that are one character, the kitchen guy, is actually based on a former incarceree who was from Hawaii. I think it's Harry Ueno and Fukuhara or something. Anyway, they're based on these men incarcerated in Hawaii. So it's such a, when I look at this film today, although it's the story of one family, it's told through the eyes of one family, it really does represent the experience of the 120,313 Japanese Americans who were incarcerated. And the film, I think, so eloquently touches upon all the common themes. The fear, the uncertainty, the fear of, uncertainty. My grandparents and my aunts and uncles. He was so afraid. They didn't know what was going to happen. They were so afraid they were going to be separated. He gathered the kids together, the 5 kids, he and my grandmother. They dressed up in their Sunday best. They took a family photo, and he gave each child a copy of that photo in case they were to be separated. And they could one day find each other. That was on my mother's side. My father's side. My father's side of the story is very much like Jeannie's story. My grandfather was picked up by the FBI, taken to county jail. My father went to visit him, bring him cigarettes. He said he never got any of it. My grandfather was later sent to Department of Justice camp in Lordsburg and then to Santa Fe. My grandmother, my father was the oldest of 4 kids. My grandmother was expecting, and they were sent to Brewer, Arkansas from California. By the time that my grandfather arrived from Department of Justice camp to be reunited with the family, the baby was already 2 years old. And my grandmother asked, "Where's Papa?" And you know what my aunt did? She ran back inside the barrack and got his photo. She did not recognize her father stepping off the bus. So I think this film captures all of that, the separation of family, the impact, the tangible and intangible losses inflicted upon people, upon community, upon our community institutions, and there's just so much there in terms of family and community. But I think also the end of the film captures perfectly the resiliency, right? The resiliency and the strength of community. And linking it today, I will say, what's different today is people are speaking up. In 1942, no one spoke up. The voices were very few. You heard, the American Friends Service helped. The Red Cross helped. But there was no one there was no organized opposition to incarcerating these men, women, and children, majority of whom were American citizens. So, anyway, that's my story.
Thanks, Carol. So one of the things I wanted to do, in addition to talking about our reactions to watching the film, and you're, I think, already beginning to do that, all of you, talking about the importance of keeping stories like these alive. But I'm also wondering if you have words of advice. They could be a call to action. They could be words of comfort. They could be exhortations. They could be inspirational. But just in this time, it's my sense that there's some level of understanding about what it is that we face. And again, it might not be directly affecting us as a smaller community, but as a community in Hawaii, if we're inclusive of every single person that's living here, no matter when they arrived, it's definitely affecting us. And so can you speak to ways to get involved? And these can be the ones that you're actively engaged in. This could be, I want to know the range of things that you see out there, whether you're personally involved with them or not. And as we've seen, memorialization, the taking of pictures, like that in and of itself can be an act, and we don't even have to call it resistance, just an act of strengthening community, strengthening communal memory, and a way of galvanizing a sense of resilience that we don't know how long we're going to be here, but by simply documenting what's going on, you're creating a record, a historical record, so that we don't have to be subject to somebody else dictating what happened or what didn't, that we have proof and evidence of what's going on. So I think there are any number of examples that you might provide, but I'm curious to know from each of you ways to make it through the times today.
I just think that we need to continue to tell my mom's story, or the story of the internment. I mean, you'd be really surprised about how many people out there aren't aware that it happened. I personally, I work in the investment management business, and I work for a firm that's diverse, that we support clients who advance social impact and social justice. And, these are all very smart, intelligent people from varied backgrounds, tough backgrounds, et cetera. And then when my mother passed, my boss asked me, he goes, someday I'd like to know your mom's story. And I was like, wow. So I sent him a couple of the articles that were published in like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and he was just blown away, right? And he's an African American guy, and and it was just really cool because the way he responded was, we need to, I want to, advance this story or get, and so he bought copies of the book, and we gave a copy to everyone at my company, and then we were giving copies to every one of our clients. And some of them, whatever, it just getting the word out there and getting it into the hands of people who can make a difference, people with money. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And if you can do that, that would be my approach, recommended approach.
I would have to say the first thing that I would say as far as what you're talking about, Logan, which about getting involved is the foundation of that would be what I would figure, looking at the crowd here and how many folks already know about a lot of these issues and such. The first step is being engaged, being thoroughly engaged, and keeping up with what's going on. Because by doing that, you will find something that is important to you. And when you find that issue that resonates with you, that's the thing that's going to propel you and really give you some energy to pursue righting that wrong or making that right or whatever it may be. You'll know it when you see it. You'll know it when you feel it. It's something that just, if you're in this room right now, it's something that's just going to burn at you, that you just have to do something. So I urge everyone to do that. The other thing is do what, to dovetail off of what Josh said, preserving these stories. These stories are important. History is important. To give you an idea, and some folks here, because I see some folks from Harris here, so they probably have heard me talk about this, but the stories have power, and I'm going to give you a good example. One of my best friends, I found out after knowing him for maybe almost a year, he shared with me that at one point he was a white power skinhead. And I was pretty surprised about this, because this is a guy who, I went to his wedding, he ended up going to my wedding, we worked together, we hung out together, that sort of thing. And I asked him how he got into that, how he got involved in that. And he just, he was looking for something that gave him his life some sort of logic, why things were a certain way. And he got in with this crowd, and, they fed him a lot of this racist stuff, and it resonated, and it kind of made sense to him. But the thing about him that kind of set him apart was he did a lot of reading. He did a lot of research. He was a smart guy. I think he ended up getting his GED, but he never graduated. But he ended up, reading a lot. It first started out, because of the white power thing, started out, studying Nazi Germany. Then he wanted to expand, so he wanted to find out more about World War II. And then as he started to expand and find out more about World War II, he started finding out about the segregated units, like the Tuskegee Airmen, the 442 100th. And he told me, he goes, that really made me kind of rethink what I was pursuing. That really made me rethink how you define someone's stature or worth or patriotism or whatever you may call it. And that was his That was the first step in his pathway to getting out of that. And looking back on it, I realized this was the reason why when the first time I met him, we used to work for this delivery company, and that's how I got to know him. The first time I met him, he came up to me, he said, "Your dad was in the 442." He didn't talk about your dad is the senator or whatever. He goes, "Your dad was in the 442." And I go, "Yeah, he was." This was the first time ever outside of Hawaii or California where I'd had someone who was not Asian come up to me talking about the 442 or the 100th, because they don't talk about that on the East Coast. This is when I'm living in DC. You know, he was the first person I ever knew that even knew who they were, and it struck me as odd. And I told him that, and he goes, "Yeah, that's how I know about your dad. I read about him, about what he did in the war, and all of them what they did in the war, and it changed the way I looked at the world." So these stories are important. They're not just our stories, they're American stories. And there are tons of other stories like that, and not just from this community, and they need to be preserved.
So well said. I think in addition to preserving stories, it's important to have more conversations like this, where we can learn from each other and we can connect with each other and draw these connections, like what we're doing tonight, between what's happened in history and what is happening today. And getting involved, I think, also begins with really learning about and getting informed about what's happening right here in our community. I wanted to share some numbers with you that I think could help paint the picture of what immigration enforcement looks like in our country and also in the state. So on any given day, 60,000 people, immigrants, are being held in detention in more than 200 facilities across this country. Some figures I've seen as high as 400 and even above that. ICE doesn't acknowledge all of these facilities. There are, in Hawaii, so there is no ICE detention facility in Hawaii. Immigrants who are picked up and arrested here are detained at the Honolulu Federal Detention Center. And now we're seeing more people being transferred here far away from their own communities and their own legal support systems to be detained here in Hawaii. On any given day, the current average is about 80 people who are held in immigrant detention. We've also seen increases in immigration arrests. So from January to July 2024, and keep in mind also, ICE is not the most transparent agency of our federal government, but from the numbers that we've seen, in January to July 2024, there were 41 arrests of immigrants here in the state. In 2025, for the same period, 153 arrests were logged in Hawaii, which marks a 273% increase. We've seen a 193% increase in detentions. So June 2024, there were 31 people at FDC. June 2025, there were 91. And then we're also seeing an increase in immigration court cases, so a backlog of currently 1,404 pending cases moving slowly through Hawaii's immigration courts. Most cases take well over a year to resolve. And a lot of people don't have access to counsel. So there's not a whole lot of awareness about this, but in immigration court, it's the only court in our country where you can face the prospect of losing your liberty, face the prospect of separation from your family and community, and you don't have a guaranteed right to a public defender in court. And the whole reason why the legal clinic exists and why we work with our partners like at UH, the Refugee and Immigrant Law Clinic. We have some great pro bono legal service providers as well. But it's a small group of people who provide pro bono immigration legal services. And we're seeing some really encouraging public investment. I want to thank you for the collection that you're doing today to support services for our immigrant communities. It's so, so needed. And your contributions go a long way. And so, how else can people help? Contributing, which you can, to organizations that are providing these services, connecting, keeping the conversations going, learning from each other, volunteering. I saw Rep. Della Abelati somewhere in the room. There she is. Rep. Della and our chairman, Bill Kaneko from the Hawaii Coalition for Civil Rights. Is he still here? So there's some really great movements happening. The legal clinic is lockstep, shoulder to shoulder with these folks. But Rep. Della is, for example, working on an effort to stand up the National Lawyers Guild and establish a court observer immigration court observer program, as well as a legal observer program for people who are publicly demonstrating in support of our communities here. And so you can volunteer. If you're a retired attorney or you know one who wants to help or you want to observe in the immigration court, you actually don't have to be an immigration attorney to do that. You can help your immigrant neighbors that way as well. And lastly, I just wanted to also call on us to exercise our power to advocate. We have a state session coming up in January. There's so much that we can do at the state and county levels to protect our communities, limit cooperation between our local law enforcement and ICE in immigration enforcement, designate sensitive spaces that are protected, where people feel safe, including places of worship, including healthcare facilities, including our schools. So much that we can do, and we need courageous policymakers, but we also need the backing of the people, of the communities, to press upon our leaders to enact these policies and protect our communities.
Well, a lot has been said this evening, and there was something that Senator Inoue said during the passage of the redress bill to apologize to those who were incarcerated and provide this very modest monetary compensation. He also made a similar statement when he was helping to preserve Honouliuli, the internment campsite here on Oahu. And he had the simple call to action, which is we've got to remain vigilant. We've got to, moving forward, we preserve these sites, we preserve these stories, not just as part of our history, but as for the future. What happened to Japanese Americans during World War II should never happen again. So there's a sign, there's a slogan, and I see it here on a t-shirt, never again. Never again means now. So our responsibility as descendants of those who were incarcerated is to carry forth not only these stories, but we need to speak out for others who cannot. We need to stand up and uphold the civil rights and the constitutional rights for all people. And that would be my call to action. But I think simple things, you can get involved, you can support the great work that is happening in our communities. You can convene these kinds of discussions and dialogues, take them back to your communities, to your organizations, and have these discussions. There are these wonderful films on the World War II incarceration. Bill Kaneko produced the most recent one, Removed by Force. But there are others. Farewell to Manzanar, the 50th anniversary is in the spring. I think it would be I hope we're not in the same situation in the spring, but we've got to keep this conversation, this dialogue going. We've got to speak out. We've got to get involved. Again, there was no one, very few voices who spoke out for the Japanese Americans during World War II. I feel like I have a special responsibility to speak up now. So thank you.
So we're just about at time, 8 o'clock. We appreciate everybody coming out tonight on this Sunday. I'll volunteer if anybody else wants to as well. If folks are looking to get more deeply involved, if you're looking for ways to get involved, I'm happy to be the point of contact and then put you in touch with the right person. I'll just stick around over here. Really appreciate the support of our sponsor organizations and also our hosts. And if I could just say one last thing, it's worth recognizing that we're in a religious institution right now. And we live in a time when I think there's sort of waning interest and participation in religious institutions, but we have a packed house on a Sunday night at the Hongwanji. And what I think that means is that we, on some level, see some benefit to plugging into sources of ethical and moral kind of truth and courage, and we find our way of engagement in the present by seeing what happened in the past and understanding that what we can do is to strengthen our communities by strengthening the organizations that kind of hold us up, provide sanctuary in all the ways, hopefully, that we can use that word, and really find rejuvenation and that sense of, Reverend Hasebe called it interconnectivity, but truly to understand that we're all connected with each other, which means that we feel like we can depend on each other, but also that others that can depend on us. If we happen to be in a position right now where we feel advantage or access or privilege, then it is really our responsibility, drawing from this past experience, to provide sanctuary for other people. So let us not forget the fact that we're in a religious institution and what that might mean for us tonight. So thank you all.
How about a big round of applause for Logan and the panel members? Thank you. I'd like to call up Jane Yamashiro.
It's so inspiring, and it's so wonderful that all of you are here, and the community came together to put this and present this to you. It's really been a privilege. I guess the best thing we can do is, get out there and don't let this happen again. So thank you for coming. Thank you for all the contributors and the people who made this happen.
Thank you. I understand it was Jane's idea about the screening, right?
Yep.
Thank you, Jane.
Nice.
So that's it for tonight. I'm sure some of the panel members will be happy to stay up here if you wanted to talk to them. Thank you. Drive safe home.
Yeah, it's so that's one of the. Yeah, did you email it? Is your email in the? Yes, you did. Okay, I will. I'm going to share with my sister too. So, sure, absolutely.